hopefully everyone can hear me. I don't project, but so my name is Rebecca Scott. I had to cut a lot out of this talk, but there will be a blog post coming out that covers it in a lot more detail. So please drop me an email and I'll send you the link when it's published. Okay, so I'm a senior consultant at Six Pivot, and apart from the work I do with my clients, I also manage a few internal projects like mentoring around our professional development program. So yeah, professional development is something that I'm really interested in and passionate about. So the kind of work that we do as programmers tends to encourage long hours and learning in our own time. I don't think this is sustainable in the long term. Burnout and mental health issues are pretty common, and our work and our personal lives suffer as a result. So when I'm working, I need to be really careful about what I decide to do at any moment. So I'll go into some ideas and principles that I've learned and how you can use them to help make good decisions. So my first real job in IT was building in-house systems for a small financial planning firm in regional Queensland. I was the only developer and I was there for about 8 years, so a pretty good chunk of my career. This gave me exposure to working directly with stakeholders, end users, and clients, and I needed to learn how to make good, or often good enough, decisions really quickly. I also worked really long hours. I'd pull overnighters, work weekends. I regularly took work home with me, and I spent most of my free time learning and trying to level up. Even though I was learning to make good decisions for the business, I wasn't applying that to my own life. I think understanding how we make decisions is essential in improving those decisions, and as a result, improving our overall quality of life. So these are the themes I'll cover. I'm a strong believer in the last responsible moment principle. I mention that a lot. Spending your time and effort is an investment, so I'll cover cost-benefit analysis and the sunk cost fallacy. And I'll also talk about reducing your cognitive load, hustle versus sustainability, and making good decisions for your project, your employer, and for yourself. I want to talk about the last responsible moment principle pretty early. I use it a lot every day for big and small decisions, so I'm going to refer to it frequently. Basically, we should avoid making a decision until the point where the cost of not making the decision is greater than the cost of making it. Understanding how this works practically is pretty important to me. For me, this means getting just enough information to make important decisions at the point where they have to be made. When I've got less information, I also like to make important decisions early, but in a way that later lets me change those decisions and shift direction without a huge cost. I'm going to cover the sunk cost fallacy, what cost-benefit analysis is and why it's important, how to ask good questions to make sure we have good data, applying the last responsible moment principle when making decisions, knowing the rules and when to break them, and being able to defer learning so that we're focusing on the right things at the right time. Then I'll talk about hustle, our tendency to do too much, and why we need to think about sustainability. When we make decisions, we're affected by cognitive biases and logical fallacies. So a bias is a preference for one direction or another. Say collecting temperature data, but you've only been collecting data during summer. The temperatures are biased higher because of the season. Cognitive biases and logical fallacies are biases that affect our cognitive processes, how we make decisions. I'll only cover the sunk cost fallacy in depth today, but I recommend learning about other cognitive biases. They're a really great introduction into how our minds work. So, a sunk cost is something that has already been spent and can't be recovered. The sunk cost fallacy is the tendency for sunk costs, past decisions, to influence future decisions by believing that the investment, the sunk cost, justifies future costs against that investment and discounting the value of other possibilities, throwing good money after bad. Once I inherited a system with a component that a former team member had written in Elixir. For context, we were a .NET shop and the rest of the system was written in C#. The component mostly worked, but there were edge cases that caused some nasty bugs. Not changing direction is actively making a decision to continue investing in the Elixir component. You can identify two options at this point. Keep the Elixir component and invest more time into fixing the bugs, or throw it away and rewrite it in C#. Ignoring the sunk cost and going with option 2 is better in the long run. The component's easier and cheaper to maintain, and maybe the team will be happier when they need to work on it. Understanding that we're biased towards overvaluing investments made in the past can help with making better future decisions. This can apply to small decisions too. A professional poker player will set a loss limit, an amount of money that they're prepared to lose. That way, if they're in a losing game, they have a clear point where they can reevaluate their position and decide to cut their losses. So for us, this is like setting a time box. You're working on a feature, you've got unknowns around the implementation, and you want to experiment with it. So you set a time box of, say, 2 hours. Then at the end of the 2 hours, you stop work and assess where you're at. If it feels like you're on the right path, then you can consolidate what you've done and keep going. But if it isn't working out, this is the time to cut your losses and find another solution. Either way, you're making a more informed decision without a big upfront cost. All right. But remember that just writing something off as a sunk cost might not be the best decision. It's easy to fall into the rewrite all the things trap. Option 3.
Can we actually bring this a little closer?
I will stand closer. Option 3 might be that some of the Elixir component can be recovered and reused during the pivot to C#. And that's what I did. I took the Elixir code and ported it to C#, and while doing this, I wrote unit tests and handled the edge cases. As it turned out, this only took a couple of days. So being agile means adapting to new conditions and taking advantage of the environment. So, the sunk cost fallacy is the tendency for our past investments, our past decisions, to be overvalued and adversely affect our future decisions. Cost-benefit analysis is where you work out the cost of doing something. You work out the benefit that you'll get from doing it and do a comparison to make a more informed decision. Even if you're just doing a quick assessment in your head, this is important when making good decisions. Often we make decisions based on intuition or gut feel. This can be okay for some small decisions or where you've solved similar problems before and know when to apply your experience. But a lot of our decisions do matter and affect our day or week or project. In finance, a cost-benefit analysis is quantitative. You give each cost or benefit a numeric value, usually dollars. This reduces the human emotional element in decision making, which sounds horrible, but when you remember that we've got these cognitive biases, it can be very useful. Sometimes you can't assign a number, like a cost that is, this is boring or this isn't fun. For me, these are still real costs. I try not to worry too much about quantifying everything, but I find that doing a cost-benefit analysis can help with making decisions. A while ago, I needed to make a recommendation to my client about how to add a new filtering feature and to give them enough information that we could estimate the effort. I wasn't familiar with the code base or the application. It was a complex screen. It summarized a lot of incoming data. At first, I thought I'd dive into the UI and work my way out to the raw data, map out the data flow to understand it end to end. This felt like the right decision because then I could figure out precisely how to build the feature. But I realized this would take a very long time and I felt it would be really boring and tedious. I needed to decide how to proceed, how to spend the rest of the day. So I did a mental cost-benefit analysis, a full deep exploration, or get a more limited high-level overview. Both those options had legitimate costs and benefits, and it still wasn't clear what was the right choice. I realised I had to choose, I needed to understand what was important to me at that moment. If I don't do that full analysis, I might make a mistake or I might miss something. Is that okay? In this case, yes. My client just wanted to know if the feature was possible, understand how it could be implemented, and get an informed estimate from the team. The limited high-level analysis meant that I could provide a recommendation in a few hours, rather than the 3 days that I figured a full analysis would take. My job wasn't to understand the application in detail. I knew what the outcome should be. I just needed to know what data was coming in, what data we needed for the filtering, and roughly where in the code the filtering needed to happen. Anything outside of that was irrelevant. In the end, my client was happy and got back a few days' budget that could be used to actually implement the feature. So, using a simple cost-benefit analysis helps us make better, more rational, and more informed decisions that solve the problem at hand. To make good decisions, we need good information. And to get that information, we need to be able to ask good questions. Step 0 is understanding who to ask what. Spend some time up front figuring out who these people are. Whenever I join a project, one of the first things I do is note down the people that I should be talking to. And talk to end users if you can get access to them. They can give you highly relevant information. Even when you're working with the best BAs, UX designers, and product owners, it's common to get work where not all the information you need has been given. You're going to need to make some decisions, and to do that responsibly, you need to ask questions. Make sure you're asking the right questions and getting meaningful answers. Understand the context. A hospital's probably going to have very, very different needs to a supermarket. A data entry form for a supermarket probably needs to be optimised for speed and ease of use. But a data entry form for a hospital may need to intentionally slow down users to limit errors. Understanding context helps you decide which questions to ask. Guide the conversation, but try not to ask leading questions. And use open-ended questions and let people explain rather than tell. Does this data field need the time? Is very specific and is probably going to get a very concise answer. Can you explain what this field is going to be used for? Is much more open-ended, and the answer might be more relevant and deeper. Just asking the first question might miss out some detail that could be important. You might make poorer decisions and need to rework or revisit them. Make sure you're clarifying and asking follow-up questions when you're not sure, and when you think that they're not sure as well. Be careful of the information bias. We tend to try to get more information than we actually need to make a decision. So try to keep in mind the problem that you're actually solving and just solve for that. And reflect on what you've learned, what you've got gaps on, any assumptions you've made that might be incorrect. Iterate if you need to. Most people prefer being asked more questions than finding out later that you've made poor decisions based on a gap in understanding. Asking good questions is a skill that's learned over time, but it's essential to understand problems and to make good, informed decisions. The last responsible moment principle is one of my favourite tools. So I use that every day for both big and small decisions. Sometimes we're operating on limited data, so remember that we've got these cognitive biases. Even then, you won't always make the best decision the first time round, so try to design your day in a way that doesn't stop you from changing course. Rather than going down a path just because it's familiar, see if there's a better path first. Time boxing an investigation or doing a technical spike can be a great way to explore a decision without fully committing to it. And it lets you pivot to something else later if you find out that it's the wrong decision. Spending 90 minutes to experiment is a good investment if it lets you make a more informed decision about something critical to your larger goals. Say you're building a system and need to decide which database vendor to use. It'd seem totally reasonable to say that this decision should be made early, because you're probably going to need a database to start building the system. Software development isn't civil engineering, and not all decisions in software development need to be fixed engineering challenges. What if instead of committing to a specific vendor early in the project, you made an early but flexible decision? So you start development on the system as soon as possible, but you work in a way that has a low switching cost if you later decide to change the database vendor. Avoiding vendor-specific features, or by using an abstraction like an ORM. Or by making good software design decisions, like separating the data layer from the business rules and UI. Then, if you later need to change vendors, you don't have a huge switching cost. You turn a large and difficult to change decision into two different decisions, one made early, which allows you to continue with your work, and one made later, when you've got more information and experience. Not all of our decisions are going to be right, but if you make flexible decisions early, gather feedback, and make better, more informed decisions later, you lower the risk of committing to a bad decision early. There's general rules and principles that we need to learn and understand as software development professionals. When interviewing someone for a job, I usually ask what they know about the solid principles. We break these rules all the time though. Whenever we build a monolithic customer service class, we break every single solid principle. We don't necessarily do this because we're lazy or bad programmers. We're making a trade-off. But we need to acknowledge that we're trading technical debt for velocity. Getting stuff done sometimes involves cutting corners and making decisions that break the rules. But if we don't first understand the rules and why we're breaking them, we can end up making poor decisions and doing less than our best work. Recently, I used what boiled down to a global variable to implement a health check. Global variables have been famously considered harmful since 1973. I've known this my entire career, but my considered harmful code let me avoid breaking several solid principles. Knowing the basic rules and principles and doing a cost-benefit analysis let me find a middle ground that was good enough. Think of it as harm reduction. Embrace the rule of 3. Write something similar 2 times and on the 3rd time refactor it. It's surprising how often the 2nd or 3rd time is unique enough that you never actually end up deduplicating and refactoring. My boss from many years ago taught me that if you finesse, you end in a mess. This is another tool I use every day. We want to write beautiful, elegant, and highly finessed code that works perfectly for the case that we optimize it for. But as soon as we try to apply it to a new case that doesn't quite fit, that elegance falls away. So sometimes the simpler the better. So, know the rules, best practices, industry standards, and know when to break them. Embrace the rule of 3 and avoid early optimization and finessing. It's practically impossible just to be aware of every new development in our industry. We just can't make every decision 100% effectively. The trick that I've been telling all along is that we don't need to. So invest your time carefully. Learn about functional programming because it's interesting, not because you're feeling FOMO and like you're a lesser person for using a for loop. Learn on the job when you can. If you've got it, use paid professional development time as much as possible. Look for employers that provide paid professional development, because they value their employees and they're investing in them. If you take opportunities for professional development seriously, you're investing in yourself and in your career in a way that lets you to continue to live your life. Deciding to learn something is an investment, so treat it like any other investment. Cost versus benefit, learn about opportunity cost, and apply the last responsible moment principle to your learning practice. And remember the sunk cost fallacy. Quitting a bad choice is a good thing. So, learn for your work and for your own enjoyment, not because of your fears or anxieties. If your employer offers professional development time, take advantage of it. Take that time seriously and apply your best decision-making skills to how you approach learning. Maybe I'm telling you to be lazy and selfish. There's a lot of hustle in this job. We learn in our own time. We're here on a Saturday. We often work long hours. Maybe some selfishness is appropriate. Burnout is a big problem in this profession. I've burned out numerous times, usually with serious personal consequences. I've needed to take extended leave, seek medical help, and even left jobs a couple of times. The job itself was only responsible for maybe 20% of that burnout. I put too much pressure on myself, and my relationships, my mental health, and my psychological safety suffered as a result. I still struggle every day. If you're coming to a conference like this, you're investing in your career and probably intending to be in this profession for a very long time. So while you're learning to make good professional decisions throughout your day, try to make sure they're also good personal decisions for you. Almost done. Without getting too philosophical, our time here is finite, so we should spend it carefully. Cognitive biases affect decision making. It helps to acknowledge them and their effects. Applying the last responsible moment principle and using cost-benefit analysis can help with making effective decisions. We can only make good decisions if we have good information and by asking the right questions at the right time. Know the rules and principles that influence our industry, so we know when to apply them and when to break them. Professional development time is highly valuable. Take advantage of it and make good decisions around your PD. Long term, your sustainability in this industry is made up of lots of small decisions. So make sure you're making good decisions for yourself. Thank you.